And now, ladies and gentlemen, Skywalker.
Thanks, Jim Davis, and thanks for tuning in to Radio Memories here on February 2nd, 2022. Already into February. Can you believe it? What happened to January? And of course, Radio Memories brought to you by Audio Girl Productions. Devastatingly effective for all of your production needs. Contact them at audiogirlproductions.com. And what a great show we've got for you today on Radio Memories. Bryan Simmons. Boy, he's been around the block a couple of times. Coast 103, K-Big 104 in Los Angeles. Also, Croy in Sacramento. Boy, talk about some big radio stations under his belt. And he's going to share today his radio memories. Joining us from his beautiful home in Northeast Nevada, radio veteran, and he's still working.
Still doing it.
One of the few. Longtime friend Bryan Simmons. It's so good to see you, Bryan.
Yeah, good to see you too. I know usually we'd hang out at the K-Earth studio back in the day.
Yeah, when we were both working for CBS, which no longer exists, CBS Radio, which no longer exists.
Yeah, and that's sad. You know, the things. It's amazing that the big three no longer are really in radio. I know there is CBS News. We carry at the top of every hour on my talk station here, but it's different. It's not the same thing. And of course, even when we worked there, it wasn't the CBS that everybody knew, from back in the day. I remember going to Columbia Square to audition for a job back in 1979. And that was when CBS was still CBS. And it was a pretty heady experience at the time. At least I felt it was.
Oh, yeah. Let's go back and let's start at the beginning. And let's pick up. And where does it begin?
5 or 6 years old, actually. My mother, being a kid, I got my own room, and it was in the back of the house. So my mom bought a radio for me to listen to fall asleep with, and I would lay there every night, and I would DX and listen to stations all across the United States. Back when AM stations could really be heard from a great distance, you had stations with a huge skywave. KFI at night came in like a local. And then, my radio station experiences started in high school. High school I went to got a federal grant for a 10-watt radio station, and we put it on the air. Actually, I wasn't part of it at the first. It started in 1974, and they brought in an actual guy who really worked in radio but had a teaching degree. He'd worked in L.A. and New York, a guy named Lloyd Schaefer. And they put the station on the air. We had 2 little Sparta setups, 2 little rooms we built. Those boards you could buy that had the turntables, everything built in. You just put it up on the pedestals and wired it in. We had 2 of those, all brand new equipment. We even had an RCA 77DX, which I think belonged to Mr. Schaefer, but we had a nice little setup. So I started there.
Beautiful microphone.
Yeah, beautiful. We're still using an EV most of the time, though. The lower price. They didn't want to beat that mic up too much. They're pretty rare, but they were fun to work with. And a guy named Don Salasco. Don was the program director of the station. I became the APD, and I was the news director. And that's a job answering phones at KROI in Sacramento, which was the top 40 station at the time. So we're at night. I was answering phones for the Dean Gosh show, and Dean.
Oh, sure.
K-Earth and KFRC and KCBQ, KYA. I mean, some big call letters on his resume back when call letters really meant something. I'm sorry, they don't anymore. It's just the way it is. But so we got a job doing that, and answering phones. It's like what's your age, what's your zip code? We'd ask them a bunch of questions. It was passive research, and they had their FM had been a part of the Concept Productions Network at the time, and they decided they were going to go local with it, and they needed operators to run the system. And of course, Don and I had third phones, so we waved our hands right away and said we could do it. So the APD for Croy at the time was a guy named Joe Krause, who went on the air by JoJo Weed. He had come with Steve Rivers from WDRQ. I think his last name was Morgan on the Q. I can't remember his first name. But he brought me over to the FM. He was going to be the PD. And so we started there, and I think I'd been there about 3 months. We were on our second or third PD at the time. It went really fast. And there was a guy named Robert John was running it at the time, and they needed a jock. And I kept saying, hey, I can do this. And they kept saying, get away, kid. You're 18. You're not ready yet. And so one day I took a tape and I gave it to him and said, hey, guy came by and dropped this off for you. I didn't tell him who it was from. And he was listening to it, behind the glass, and he's looking at me and he says, this you, kind of thing. And I brought me in and said, why didn't you give me this 3 weeks ago? And the next day I was doing middays. And I did that until they found a midday jock, and then I went to overnights. And then I guess it was probably about 6 months later, everybody was going to Wi-Fi or WeFM from Croy. Steve Rivers is going. And they needed jocks for the AM, and I got a call from Dave Michaels, Dave Yodelman, you might know.
Yeah.
Was in K-AM, K-Earth, and KISS. He brought me over for weekends, and I changed my name again. I was using Brian Mason, then Brian Davis, and I used that name until almost the end of when I was in Sacramento. My last 8 or 9 months, I was doing news at KCTC, oddly enough, and then the whole thing with Coast happened.
Is that the KCTC when it was beautiful music?
Yes. And
when it was KC
TC. Yeah.
TC.
Well, the interesting thing was,
but wasn't that almost preparing you for long?
Yeah, the Coast. Yeah. People walk up to you all through the years when I worked at Coast. It was always, well, do the thing you do with the weather. They'd want to hear you go along the coast, But yeah, I went to Croy AM, and then I went full time there eventually under a guy named Terry Nelson.
Now that must have been a blast, because you're talking about, this is the 1970s. Yes. And everything is really exciting in radio at this point.
Right, because there's not a lot of competition. Radio is still a big deal. If you walked into a store and somebody recognized you, they'd start freaking out. It was like you were a celebrity. You really were. And it was interesting. One time I was walking through Macy's with my soon-to-be wife, eventual wife, and these two kids were behind us on the escalator. And I'm talking to my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, and this kid walks up and says, "Are you Brian Davis?" And I went, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "Oh, I could tell from your voice." But, nowadays, I don't know that really happens.
No, it no longer happens. That's long gone.
Croy, of course, had been a kind of a jumping point for a lot of people. It was known as a really good medium market radio station, along with KTKT in Tucson and the Ape in Jacksonville, places like that, Waze in Charlotte. So,
but so many big radio legends came out of Croy, and it
went through it.
Or went through it, and it's funny because you are one of those people. But during that time, there must have been some crazy things that were going on, and the experience must have been.
And we were killing the competition. KNDE was our competition. KNDE,
and it's been talked about, but it's never really been explained what that radio station was.
Well, it had been KXOA for years.
Right. AM.
Then the AM and the FM got sold. The FM was bought by the Browns and Bill Drake. Right. And so they were doing a solid gold format over there. And KNDE debuted as an album rock station, but it didn't really catch on. And so they went top 40 with it. And actually, Dave Williams, who had worked at Croy, who's now down in Dallas. He's a news anchor down there. And Dave from KABC. And,
right.
And Dave was a top 40 jock and a PD at the time. And he actually beat Croy in one book in 1975, I believe, which may have been in between his stints at K-Earth and WHBQ in Memphis. He was an RKO PD for a couple places. And that kind of happened through his friendship, I think, and working for Dwight Case, who had been the GM at Croy and then had moved on to take over RKO. And Dwight, we just lost Dwight a few years ago. A big name in radio. He was huge, massive name, right up there. But KNDE did a top 40 format, but towards the time I was working at Croy, KNDE had kind of fallen on hard times. They had brought Steve Rivers in to be the PD, and he was there a few months, and then Croy hired him away, and I don't know the story on that. And so they brought in Mark Driscoll, to program Candy. And he did some different things with it that we had never seen before, but it just didn't work. Croy was just a juggernaut at the time. And my last book there, we had an 8.1 in the ratings. And I don't know where Candy was, but it was pretty far down. And right about that time.
And you guys had that cool van.
Yeah, we had a black van. It looked really nasty. It was jacked up a little in the back, and it had big fat tires and side pipes. And it was black, and it just looked nasty and mean. And
it was really, it really was right alongside the KHJ van. You know, I mean, it looked just as cool.
The surprise prize van, I think they called it.
Oh yeah, that's it. You're right.
Yeah, right. So yeah, and I loved RKO, but at that point in time, I was being influenced by people at KCBQ. And so when I was doing nights at Croy, I was known as a screamer. I dialed it way back when I started doing middays at KXOA, but in between those two stations, I worked at KZAP, which was a Burkhardt Abrams station. At that point, it had been sold. It had been a progressive station. And all of a sudden now it was going to be kind of a little more processed, shall we say. And that station took off and dominated the market for years. But I ended up leaving there after a year to go back to KXOA because I wanted to work with Terry Nelson again. He had offered me a job doing middays, and I thought, okay, I want to do this.
What a great jock. Yeah, what a great jock.
So smooth. He worked at Croy a couple times. He left Croy the first time to go to 99X in New York and did mornings for the RKO station there.
Yeah.
Interesting story. He and Imus knew each other from Stockton, from KJoy. They were friends.
Oh, is that right?
When they were doing mornings
I didn't know that.
In New York.
Wow.
Yeah. They would call each other on the air and put each other on the air on their respective stations, much to the consternation of the NBC and RKO execs. But they had a ball. Terry later moved to afternoons, and they brought in Crazy J. Thomas to do mornings there. And then he came back to Croy in 77, initially to do mornings. Later became the program director, and that's where I felt like I really flourished under him. Even though I sucked, I learned a lot there.
When I arrived in Sacramento in 1984, I could never understand why Terry Nelson was in that market, because he was just, oh my God, what are you doing here?
It had more to do with family. His wife at the time didn't really want to live in. They didn't want to live in the Bay Area. They wanted to get back to Sacramento, where they had friends. He just decided to, that's okay. I'll go back to Sacramento. I don't mind it. And he could command a good salary for Sacramento too.
But he was so much bigger than the market.
Right. But then oddly enough, he ended up at KCTC doing mornings.
I know he did. Yeah.
I don't know how long he stayed after they became an AC station. I'm sure he was there at the start of Mix 96, but I don't know. I'm kind of fuzzy on that. I was in LA at the time and not really paying too much attention to what was going on in Sacramento.
Because I had gone back to LA as well.
It's funny because we kind of tread the same battlefield at different times.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But and then it's funny because I sent a tape to KFI back in 1982, early 82, when I knew that the stations were kind of going to go and KXOA was moving the music of your life, which I didn't want to do. I wasn't ready to play Sinatra, so. I sent a tape to KFI. I got 2 reject letters, one from Johnny K and one from Tom Bigby. And that was early in the year. And about 8 months later, I was working at Concept Productions. I just started back there doing syndicated voice tracking. And picking up R&R, and there's a picture of Johnny K, and it says Coast to Go, all hit, So, that's pretty cool. Got home that night, and there was a message for me from Johnny K saying, call me in the morning. He had held on to my tape and decided he wanted to hire me. And I thought, well, this is cool. I wanted to go to San Diego, but LA I'll take. My ultimate goal was always San Francisco, which I've never worked, oddly enough, but because I'm from the Bay Area.
Really?
Yeah. How weird is that?
I thought you had worked San Francisco.
No, wish I had. I wanted to, like every other guy that grew up there, I wanted to work at KFRC. And I did send them a tape back when Jerry Cagle was the PD.
Yeah.
And I got a call back. I wasn't what they were looking for, but that they thought I was good enough. But Jerry was looking for a female.
Well, you are so good, and you are really you are such a great jock. And I really thought that was on your resume.
No.
I thought you had been in San Francisco.
No. And I was trying to get into KGB AM because that was when I was at KXOA, that was our sister station. But that place was a brick wall.
Believe me, I've worked San Diego, and that was no great shakes. So,
but I looked at it as a stepping stone, and it was a cool station. I had been down there before as the production director for KXOA. I went down and would visit with Norman Flint, who was the production director at 13K and KGBA FM. And so I would go down to learn techniques from him. This is back before everybody had multi-track. So you had to learn how to put things together with a 2-track studio, a couple of cart machines, and a turntable, you know. And so I learned a lot of really cool production techniques, which actually transferred well into the digital era. But so I was familiar with it, and I really wanted to work there too. I thought, well, that would be cool. You know, how many guys have gone through KGB? You know, Charlie Van Dyke, Mark Dennis, you name it, you know.
Sure.
So, but ended up in.
It was once a great stepping stone market. By the time I went through San Diego, it was just like.
Yeah. Well, times change. You know, Sacramento's different too. The last time I was there, I didn't recognize anything on the radio. You know, everything's changed. Stations that I worked at, like Croy, I think is Hispanic, Catholic talk radio. You know, it's AM. So, you know, it's talk radio land. Yeah, you know, I was so blown away to get the call from Johnny, and I called him that morning. The next day, right at 9 a.m., I was like right on the phone, and he wanted to hire me. And I remember saying, so will I be doing, you know, overnight weekends? And he says, oh, no, you're going to be full time. And I said, oh, will be midnight to 6 or 2 to 6. And he goes, oh, no, you're doing 10 to 2 at night, which, you know, I think I probably at that point had tunnel vision, like what's going on here, you know? So mind was totally blown. But, and oddly enough, 6 months later, he says, I want you to do afternoons, because he was moving up to be the PD at KFI and Coast at the time. And so, yeah, it was kind of, you know, and that was back when, you know, being in LA was something. I mean,
oh, yeah.
There, the TV's on, you've got Dr. George, you've got Jerry Dunphy, you've got all these icons on TV and on the radio, Loman and Barkley, Gary Owens, all these people are still on the air, you know.
Oh, it really meant something. It meant something to be doing afternoon drive.
And I remember too, the first day we turned the station on. Oddly enough, our overnight guy was supposed to turn the station on, Chris Roberts, but he was still stuck over on KFI that night. So Johnny looks at me and says, "You're going to turn us on, you know, shift change at midnight." But the next morning, I guess it was about 5:30. I was going on until 6 that day. Ran into Loman and Barkley in the hallway, and of course my knees are knocking together because I know who Loman and Barkley are, and they treated me like an equal, which mind blown right there, you know. And they were our leaders when we had union meetings. Both stations were music. We are on the same contract. They were our leaders. We looked to them. They when we had the meetings at AFTRA when it was at Hollywood and Highland. Way up top, they had this conference room that overlooked Hollywood. And I remember the meetings there with them, and it was pretty crazy. You know, a few months before I was just doing news on KCTC, and now I'm in Hollywood. My mind was blown, let's just say, you know. But different times now. Radio is very different, as you and I both know.
It's interesting, after you left Coast and then you went to CBS and then you spent a lot of time there at CBS, and you were at the Wave.
Yeah, I was at the Wave. It was funny when I went over there. Johnny brought me over. He was programming both stations at the time, K Earth and the Wave. All my friends were like, they thought I was going to go to K Earth. You know, I guess style wise, they thought that's where I should be. But I ended up over at the Wave and had a good time there. But, you know, there were limitations with the contract, as you know. You could only work so many days in a row and so many hours a day. That's how they were able to have a union contract that paid well, but you didn't really get what you could get, obviously. But I had a lot of fun there. It was a great station. I loved when we went urban AC, R&B. Loved playing the Motown stuff. I mean, I loved working there. I kind of almost compared with my time at K-Big. Because you were kind of free to say what you wanted to say and do the content you wanted to do. So it was fun. There was production elements to the wave that weren't with any other radio station. When you did liners, you did them in three segments, and you changed music beds under you. It was very produced. So I appreciated that kind of stuff. But yeah, I loved it when it was Urban AC, and I would love to have stayed there. The last year I was there, I worked in the production department for the cluster, because I could also voice and produce. So not only did I produce other people, the voiceover from other DJs there, but got to do my own work as well. And I enjoy that. It's kind of, I look at it as an artistic thing to put nice production together. I call it stop set beautification.
And so what are you doing now currently?
Well, I had left LA to go to Albuquerque and work for Cumulus there. I programmed Magic 99.5. And then there were some changes in management, as you know, about radio. I exited the station, and a couple of days later got a call from Tom Chase and Ken Sutherland here in Elko. They have a 6-station cluster, all FMs. And they wanted to know if I could come help fill in. They had a jock here, a very popular morning jock on their hot AC, who had been life flighted to Utah, to Salt Lake City. She was very ill, and they needed some help filling in. So I came down to do a month of fill in, ended up staying for 2.5 months. And when I went back to Albuquerque, they invited me to come back full time. And I thought, well, okay. And I knew that Tom was retiring. So came here and became the PD when Tom retired. Tom Chase, if everybody knows Eric Chase, who in California, he's Paul Christie down in Houston. He does mornings on our classic hit station from Houston via voice track, but he's great. But Tom, unfortunately, right after he retired, caught COVID, and he'd been fighting lymphoma. So we lost him, I guess, about 3 weeks later. Pretty sad. But been sitting in his office now for a little over a year, and it's been an interesting year, to say the least.
You, my friend, are a survivor, and you continue to work in this business, this crazy business. And I appreciate your time, Bryan, and I thank you for taking the time to share your radio memories with us today. And I hope you come back and let us know what's going on with you.
Sure.
And as we move forward in terrestrial radio, and we find more and more terrestrial radio stations kind of disappearing,
especially
as digital media seems to be taking over. And I like to check in with people and see how they're doing. And I wish you nothing but great success, and take care of yourself.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Loved working with you there at CBS. And if you're ever driving to Salt Lake City through Highway 80, we're one of the largest towns in the area. We have Salt Lake, and we have Twin Falls and Reno. We're kind of right in the middle. So a lot of people stop through here. We have casinos. We have, everything that Nevada can offer you. And, we've got 6 stations here that you can listen to. Talk, classic country, we have big country. We've got a hot AC and a classic hit. So when you're driving through, you'll get anything you want on the radio. Anyway, it's been great talking to you, Sky, and had a great time. And yeah, I'll come back, definitely.
Can't wait to have you back on the show, Bryan, and thanks for your time. Now, Radio Memories is going to be on now every other Wednesday from here on out. And coming up in March, we've got March Madness, and I hope you participate in this. It doesn't matter what market size, and I would like, if you would, and if you just want to send me a story, but I'd like to have you on Zoom, or if you just want to share a story on the phone, contact me on Messenger at Skywalker, and let's get you on March Madness, and share some of those stories. And of course, you can remain anonymous if you don't want to say who you are. But share some of those crazy stories that happened to us back in the day, when things, we got away with things back, when radio was fun. And March Madness, that's what we're dedicating March to here on Radio Memories. So please messenger me at Skywalker, and let's get March, let's have some fun in March and tell some fun stories, because I know I am, and I already have some people that are already getting set to reveal some fun stories. So, and I'd love for you to share as well. And like I say, we're going to be on every other week now, every other Wednesday on Radio Memories. So until next time, for more great radio memories.
Check out past interviews on the Radio Memories YouTube channel and on Spotify. Click the links. This is Maggie McKay for Radio Memories, a Dave Schuyler production.
Radio Memories.